Good evening. Welcome to Charter Township of Van Buren Planning Commission meeting for Wednesday, January 23rd of 2019. We'll start with a roll call, please.
Joan Franklin. Here. Jeff Jar.
Here.
Donald Boynton.
I understand it's on its way.
Brian Kelly.
Here.
Medina Atchison. Here. Sherry Budd.
Here.
Carol Thompson.
Thank you. We'll have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. Second.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Kelly and support Commissioner Jar. Any additions or changes to the agenda? All in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the agenda is approved. We have minutes from the meeting of January 9th of 2019. Is there a motion to approve the January 9th minutes? So Commissioner Atchison, support Commissioner Franzoy. Any changes or correction to the minutes? All in favor of approving the January 9th, 2019 minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the minutes are approved. First item on tonight's agenda under new business is the Real McCoy Barbecue temporary land use. The applicant, the Real McCoy Southern Barbecue, is requesting temporary land use approval to operate an outdoor carryout restaurant at 39431 East Huron River Drive, Van Buren Township, 48111. This property is located on the southwest corner of Hannon Road and Huron River Drive. The activity is proposed from January 24th of 2019 through May 15th of 2019. And we'll start with the presentation by the applicant.
Hello, how y'all doing?
Good, how are you?
Well, I'm just trying to get a permanent, well, first of all, I'm Mr. Langford, the owner of the Real McCoy Southern Barbecue. And I'm trying to seek a permit to do the outside barbecue carryout until we actually open the business that we have there. So we've been blessed to find a location there, and we going forth with trying to open that building at that address.
Excellent. All right, we have a review by staff, and we'll see if there are any questions or comments. We may need you to respond, okay?
Sure.
Thanks. Director Akers, you want to walk us through the review, please?
Yes, thank you. So the Real McCoy Southern Barbecue is requesting a temporary land use permit for a barbecue trailer and outdoor carryout restaurant, which would operate from January 24th, 2019 through May 15th, 2019. We reviewed it based on section 7.120 of the zoning ordinance, which I'll go through in a moment. I just want to give a brief overview. We've been working with Mr. Langford to occupy an existing vacant space in the building on the site. He's currently working towards making some improvements that need to be made in order for a restaurant to go in there. In the meantime, what he would like to do is he'd like to be able to serve food on the outside area in the parking lot. So what this request is while it is temporary in nature, the intent is for Mr. Langford to eventually to go into the building and be a permanent business within the community. So what I'll do, I will, if it's okay with the Planning Commission, rather than go through each individual item, I'll just highlight some of the areas where we had initial concern and explain how the applicant had met our concerns with regards to those areas. The first item of concern that we had was adequacy of parking and access. So it is an older building. It was developed prior, and the parking areas on the site are fairly limited. So one of the concerns that we had is we wanted to make sure that the barbecue area is not taking up, a large amount of parking. So the area that has it on the site, it's on the far western side of the site in an area where there actually isn't a parking spot. So where he's occupying it is not an existing parking spot. So he's going to have his barbecue trailer there, and it shouldn't have any impact on the existing parking or access on the site. The other item that we specifically looked at with regards to a barbecue use, he is going to have a grill. The grill is going to create smoke and odors. We wanted to make sure that the use was compatible with the surrounding land uses. The property is zoned C1, so it is the use is appropriate for the zoning of the property, as carryout restaurants are permitted use. But there are neighboring properties that are zoned single-family residential within close proximity to the area. One of the things that we had asked Mr. Langford to take care of and to look into was to reach out to some of those neighbors to see if they would have any objections to him cooking in closer proximity to the homes. And Mr. Langford has, which I had put on the desk prior to the meeting, it wasn't in the packet, has provided signatures from several of the adjacent homeowners that indicated that they have no objection to his land use being there. Especially the address that I wanted to note was the 39497 West Churn River Drive address, which is immediately adjacent to where he's going to be cooking. So due to this, the fact that he had neighbors, he had reached out to them and talked to them about the potential, negative issues that it could bring, the fact that they had signed it and it indicated that they have no issues with the operation. And in addition to that, with, the wind primarily moving from a west to east motion, I don't think, the odors are gonna have a significant impact on the adjacent residential properties where we would have to turn down the application. One of the questions that we did ask, as this is adjacent to residential areas, we wanted to make sure that the applicant was adequately disposing of trash and cleaning up the site, so they do have permission to use the dumpster on site. There is an existing dumpster, so any trash will be deposited there. There are bathrooms within the building, which the employees and any of the customers will be allowed to use. So they're going to have existing sanitary facilities. The hours of operation for the barbecue trailer are going to be from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m., so those are well within normal working hours. It shouldn't have a negative impact on the adjacent homes. One item that we do want to see, and as we are recommending approval, we're recommending it conditioned upon the applicant showing that they have an active Wayne County Health Department permit. So we want to make sure that they're properly licensed through the county and they've met those criteria. The last item that I wanted to discuss was with regards to fire lanes, protection, and security. There is a letter from the township's fire marshal who had reviewed this application dated December 18th, 2018, where he has recommended approval of their plan as submitted. So based on the fire marshal's letter and based on the findings in the staff report, staff is recommending approval of the temporary land use request for the barbecue operation to operate a trailer at the address listed in the staff report from January 24th, 2019 through May 15th, 2019, with the condition that they provide a active permit from the Wayne County Health Department. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the Planning Commission may have.
Great, thanks so much. Questions or comments from the committee?
I have a question for Mr. Langford.
Certainly. Commissioner Jar.
You will be making hot sanitizer water in buckets inside of the party store each morning? I read that in.
Actually, we do that every 2 hours.
Every 2 hours?
Yes, sir.
Will you be disposing of them inside the party store as well?
Yes.
Question answered, thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone in the audience? Questions for staff or for the applicant? If there are no more questions and everyone is happy with the proposal, do we have a motion to go forward for approval?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Kelly.
I'd move to grant approval of a temporary land use request for the Real McCoy Southern Barbecue to operate the barbecue trailer at 39431 West Huron River Drive from January 24th, 2019 through May 15th, 2019, subject to the analysis and the conditions detailed in the staff review letter dated January 9th, 2019.
Okay, support?
Ms. Chairman, is it east Huron River Drive or west?
It is east.
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 Good catch.
Support.
Is that also support?
Yes.
Excellent. Support, Commissioner Jar. All right, any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Mr. Langford, thank you so much. We wish you good luck, and hopefully we'll get to see you in the temporary land use and then when you're permanently installed.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Next item on tonight's agenda, item 2, new business, is Project Sycamore, review and comment on proposed variance in association with the site plan. The applicant, Julian Beglin, is requesting review and comment on a proposed wall height variance in association with the proposed site plan for improvements on an existing industrial site. The location is 9,000 Hagerty Road. The property is located at the northwest corner of Hagerty Road and Tyler Road. We'll start first with a presentation by the applicant.
Just give me a minute, I'm just gonna
Sure,
set
go
up a
ahead,
couple
take your
bullets
time getting
for you.
set up.
It's gonna help describe one of them. Good evening, and thank you for your time this evening. My name is Julian Beglin. I work for HF Lens Company. We are a Michigan corporation based also in Pennsylvania and several other states in the U.S. I'm here tonight representing our client, JPMC, for a 53-acre parcel on Hagerty Road just north of Tyler Road. The primary reason for our variance request is to provide additional security and site hardening for this parcel right here. So what I want to do is just run you through some of the design criteria that we've had to put together in order to create this secure perimeter for our client. As you can see, this is an existing building that's outlined in red. It's about 350,000 square feet, primarily office and data processing. Surrounded by, on the front, this is actually looking north in that direction. So not to be misconstrued, this is Tyler right here. Parking in the front, there's two driveways, one right here and one at the other end of the sheet, and a delivery driveway in the back on Tyler. The project basically entails providing some security measures for the entire perimeter of the site in order to protect the assets inside the main building. So what I've done here is this is showing the entire site, and then this is the area in question that we're doing the majority of the improvements. All right, so this is the plan that focuses on those improvements. What we have is a site fence, ornamental, black picket type fence that is for anti-climb and also K-rated for site hardening to prevent penetration from a vehicle. That basically loops around the entire site. The building in blue right here is a VVRC, that is a Vehicle and Visitor Receiving Center. This is a security post for anyone entering the site. They are cleared through this by means of entering right here and coming in along this entrance and coming through a vehicle inspection bay, being screened, and then being released into the site. So the wall in question that we're here for this evening is this red heavy line that extends the whole way along this driveway. In order to provide some protection for the main building from any illicit activity that may occur from someone wanting to damage the interior building, this wall provides some protection. And in order for it to provide adequate protection against a tractor-trailer sized vehicle with a box of 13 feet 6 inches in height, it has to exceed that. So that's why we're asking for a variance to permit a wall of 14 feet in height, which is 6 feet in excess of your 8-foot requirement. The construction of the wall is a gravity-type wall. It is a precast concrete block that is placed with about a 12-inch footing over compacted stone material. And then the blocks are set in place, and connected only by their weight and a, a locating dome on each stone. And I believe that was in your packet. The section of that looks like this. So the wall is a dry stack. These blocks are large in size. They are, like I said, precast, reinforced concrete, weighing in excess of 1,000 pounds apiece. So by gravity wall, I mean it holds itself in place by virtue of its own weight. The back side of the wall, shown here in dark green, is an earthen slope of a 3-to-1 back slope. That is not in excess of the slope permitted by the township ordinance for any earthen berms that are provided. And also for future maintenance reasons, we don't want to go in excess of that slope, so it can still be maintained with standard mowing equipment. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to show you a couple things on this plan that I think pertain to the wall itself. The most critical thing, I think, is to make sure that this wall is not imposing upon the neighbors and the surrounding environment. So I want to show the scale of the property. It's a very large property. It's 53 acres. And the distance from the property line, not from the street or the pavement, but from the property line, is 291 feet back to the face of the wall along Haggerty. Additionally, there is 107 feet from the property line to the north, and that's to the end of the wall, which would be the short section. And that section tapers down with the slope. The dimension from the front of the building out to the setback is 60 feet, and then an additional 75 feet, which is the setback along Haggerty Road. So as you can see, the building, which is a fairly small building, it's about 9,000 square feet, single story, contains an office and some security, and a dock for delivery screening. So the wall sits back behind that. There's approximately 10 feet between the building and the wall. That will be protected by a fence so that that intermediate space is not somewhere that someone can hide. And everything is protected by cameras and motion detection. So what I have for you is some three-dimensional renderings. And these are to provide you some size and scale as the wall would look from Haggerty Road. So this first picture is taken from this arrow point right here, number 1. And as you can see, the building in the background is the 2-story building that is right here. That building is approximately 33 feet in height. It's a 2-story block building, and you can just see the top of it in the background. The VVRC is actually about 18 feet, and then an additional couple of feet for parapet, just to hide mechanical equipment. So the wall is less than that. But at that distance, you can see that the size and scale of the wall is dramatically diminished because of that almost 300-foot setback. And so that's how we feel along with an architectural finish, both in the pattern, which would be the keystone finish that is in your packet. So a keystone finish is a naturally occurring stone in the area. This sort of cut stone look. It's got some browns and orange and tans in it to match the new VVRC building color scheme. in addition to the existing structure, which has those same tones, and then it has some texture to help kind of blend it back into the site. Beyond that, I don't think I have anything else to represent. There will be a stone apron that surrounds the top of the wall. This is in compliance with an anti-fall approach where we put a 10-foot apron of large number 4. It's like a riprap, baseball-sized rocks that wrap around the top and sides to keep the maintenance staff who may be cutting, weed whacking around the top of the grass berm. And this is on the secure side of the site, so it's not accessible to the general public. In addition to that, my client uses a professional lawn care service, so these are trained, hopefully safety trained in cutting things such like this, so they're not approaching the top of that wall area when they're doing their maintenance. So the setback from the top of the wall, the blocks are about 24 to 27 inches in depth, and then you have the 10-foot apron, and then your grass beyond that. That's all to try and comply with the stormwater, infiltration requirements. So I got a couple more images. Hopefully you can all hear me. This is image number 2. So this is looking all the way from this point right here. So this is looking back where you can see the wall right here, the building in the background. We do have a landscape plan that's been submitted as part of the land development documents. This is representative of that. It may not match it exactly, but with some of the softening of the landscaping, the wall kind of disappears in the back with the VVRC building right here. Image number 3 is taken from this location. So looking across this visitor parking lot, as you can see again, the screening, the wall with the texture, and the building in the background. And then lastly, image number 4 is generated from this point over here, looking back in the opposite direction, where there's again some landscaping, and you can see the wall back here ending right there where it turns 90 degrees and then tapers down with the berm. And to that, I yield back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Beglin. You've explained it very well and given us a lot of details. Are there questions or comments from the commission for the applicant or for staff? Anyone in the audience, questions or comments? I think I have a kind of silly question. So I think I understand everything that you presented about the wall height and depth, how it's built, the location of it, and how people will process through. But what if I'm someone coming to work on the site, or using that front parking area, and it's a morning like this morning, and I slide into that wall? So is that person just going to have a crunched car? The wall's going to be stable enough that we have safety for visitors and workers as well?
Absolutely. So it's a great question. There's about a 10-foot section of unpaved area. It's actually a drainage swell, again with those number 4 riprap rock that would probably intercept a vehicle.
Okay.
But it's a snow melt area. It's an area to remove material to the side. If someone would run off the road, the wall will win. It's
Sure.
it's most certainly, each block weighs about as much as a small vehicle. So when you put them all together and they're all locked together and they have all that backfill, yeah, it's designed to take quite quite a lot of force.
And I know we're not doing site plan review tonight because you're mostly talking about your request, but what are the posted speed limits then along that drive?
So I don't believe we have a speed limit shown on the interior, but this would be low speed, low volume. Just to bring you up to speed, the original site plan shows you can see on this original site plan, there's a lot of this pavement that's coming out as part of the project, and the only piece that's remaining is this new visitor parking lot of about 47 spaces, and then we have about 84 spaces here that remain for the staff that are permitted to come through and park on the interior. So those would be badged, previously screened employees, vendors, those types of folks. And then obviously, anyone that comes through that's doing deliveries is coming all the way back to our dock. It's in the back here.
Okay. Thank you, that helps a lot.
Oh, you're welcome.
Sure, Commissioner Boyd.
Madam Chair. Given your description of the wall as far as the mass and weight and whatnot, have you taken the time to do a little investigation of the ground as far as any expected or projected settling of the wall over time? You know, something as massive as you have described, you know, gravity is pretty unrelenting and nothing wins against gravity. So what do we have under that's going to fortify or support this wall?
So it's an excellent question. Part of the due diligence that we've already performed is to do a geotechnical investigation, of which we did 3 soil borings along this main driveway to get composite soil samples. And our geotech has provided the soil sampling and the composite strength of that soil. And it's very high. It's 4,000 to 5,000 pounds per square inch, which is a very high soil density. And so our contractor is required to prepare the surface and modify to get the grade, and then check the compaction before they start putting the block in place.
And that also accounts for the drainage, as you say, will be in the front.
Correct. Yep. The wall is actually designed to be dewatered both front and back. So there's actually under drain that runs the length of the wall in the stone media. So this stone is all the way from the top to the bottom. So any rain that falls or water that gets behind the wall goes down the back of the wall into a French drain pipe.
Okay.
And then comes out and back into the storm system to make sure there's no hydraulic issue.
Sure, Commissioner Atkinson.
Chair. Mr. Beglin, JP Morgan, your client, has had this property since 1997. Can you tell me why they've hired you to add this addition onto the wall? Are they starting to secure product that needs extra security? Is there some kind of exposure that is new to Van Buren Township?
So, yeah, some history on JP Morgan Chase. The facility was previously owned by Bank One. Back when we did pretty much everything with paper. 97 and earlier was before the use of internet banking, and so it was primarily office and processing. So they would get checks, all the paperwork, it was file storage. And when JP Morgan Chase took it over, it pretty much functioned the same way in those first probably 5 or so, 10 years maybe. And in 2005, they did a construction project to add this piece of the building over here to accommodate more data processing area. As computers have progressed, they've gotten smaller and much more condensed, and so over a period of time, the building has gradually grown into a data processing facility rather than a paper processing facility. More recently, they've made a global change to their process, and they are now basically condensing lots of remote data processing centers into essentially 4 throughout the country. And this is one of them, and they've adopted this same higher level of security at all 4 locations, all of which are tied together and work sort of simultaneously. So we have a couple factors. We have what occurred in 9/11, so we have to be cognizant of terroristic type activity, and also just the amount of data that we store these days that the FDIC is required to mandate any banking facility to have increased security.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Any other questions or comments, audience or commission? Director Akers, you're asking for comments, general comments back to take to the zoning appeal, right?
Yes, one of the requirements of the township zoning ordinance is that before the BZA makes a decision connected to a proposed site plan, the appeal has to first be reviewed and commented on by the township's planning commission. So we do have the appeal scheduled for the February 12th Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. And any comments that are made, of course, are going to be in the minutes and be shared with the BZA at that meeting.
Excellent. Is there anything else that you need from us this evening?
No, I don't believe so, as long as the questions and comments are in the minutes. That's what we need.
Great. Thanks very much, Mr. Beglin. As I said, it was a good presentation, very helpful to us to understand.
Well, again, thank you very much for your time.
Is the idea of looking at the fencing ordinance later on affect this as to whether they go to the BZA or not?
The new fencing provisions will impact this project as well as the US Signal project as well. So if we don't pass them, then they may have to consider another variance too.
Okay, well, when we look at the fence order, it will affect this.
Yes.
Good question. Okay. Next on the agenda, item 3. Pasco Dry Depot expansion is looking for final site plan approval. The applicant, MG2, is requesting final site plan approval for the construction of a 43,260 square foot addition and related parking areas to the Costco Distribution Center. The location is 5860 Belleville Road. Property is located on the west side of Belleville Road between Michigan Avenue and Van Born Road. And we'll start with a presentation by the applicant. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Brad Christian. I'm with V3 Companies. We're the civil engineer for the project, both the original project and this building expansion. And Ryan Hartsuff is here with MG2 as well. So we're going to do a co-presentation, if that works. Basically the project, as you noted, it's located at 5860 Belleville Road. It's an existing Costco trucking facility that is approximately 350,000 square feet today. At the time that it was permitted in 2014, it was decided by Costco to build the original 350,000 square feet and then have an addition or a future addition area for their dry facility and then their wet facility. So the wet is the cold and the dry is just their dry goods side. At the time that it was built, they didn't need all of that square footage, but it was shown on all the original plans in 2014. And the overall project was designed to accommodate those future building expansions when in fact Costco is ready to build them. And as well as the two buildings, so the existing building sits in the middle of the site, and then the dry depot expansion is on the west side, and then the wet depot would be on the east side of the building. So currently the proposal is to build that west dry depot expansion, which is about a total square footage of about 43,000 square feet. The original had it at about 40,000 square feet. The reason for the slightly larger square footage is that they're adding a 2,700 square foot break room and restroom because the building is very long and the current restrooms are kind of in the center of the building. So they're adding a break room restroom on that side, just so employees don't have to go all the way back to the middle in order to take a break or use the restroom. So although that is a slightly higher square footage, it's in an area that was proposed to be pavement before, so it's just roof instead of pavement. So really, and it's just restrooms, so there's not any high demand use being placed there. So the other expansion portion of this is adding at the southwest corner of the site, south of where this expansion will be located, expanding or fully building out the initial plan for all the truck parking stalls. So there'll be 133 new truck parking stalls. Currently, it's just green space, but as I said before, it was always proposed to be truck parking. And again, it just wasn't built out just because the full building wasn't built out at the time in 2015. So when we had originally permitted it with the township, those areas on the building area on the west, and the east, and the southwest parking were all shown as future expansion. When we permitted with Wayne County, though, we did permit it as a full build-out. So Wayne County, as far as stormwater management, their construction permit is for that full build-out of the parking and the east and west building expansions. So as far as Wayne County is concerned, it was permitted for the whole, the full build-out. And we did go back to Wayne County, explain kind of the expansion plan or that we were building out this future portion now. They understood that, and, they aren't requiring any, the code, the stormwater code hasn't changed. So we're still good as far as stormwater goes. There will be, with the addition of the break room, there will be a water service and a sanitary service required. The sanitary service will go directly north to an existing 21-inch sanitary main that runs along the north property line. The water service will go also directly north to a 12-inch water main that was, when the original build-out was done, the township requested that a 12-inch main be extended all the way to the west property line for future expansion to the west, which is property that Costco also owns but is vacant as of now. So we'll be basically tying in near the west property line with this new domestic service, which actually is probably a good thing because it will circulate that 12-inch main, almost all the way to its current end at the west property line. There were comments provided as far as the team's concerned. We'll be able to accommodate all the comments. I think it's just some cleanup, some dotting i's, crossing t's on parking count numbers. So we see no concerns with the comments. We'll be able to accommodate those with the final updated set of plans. I don't know, you want to add anything?
I think you covered it.
Okay.
Yeah, you got all the numbers.
Yeah, so we're here for questions if you need to.
Great, thanks so much. It was nice to have the update. I'm glad Costco's doing so well.
Yeah, for sure. It has not been long. So
We'll hear the reviews from our planners and our engineers, and then see if there are questions or comments back to you all.
All right, thank you very much.
Start first with McKenna & Associates, Mr. Sloan.
Hi, thank you. We have a review letter dated January 18th, and the applicant had covered many of the items that our letter covers. So what I'll do is just go to our recommendation on page 4, which is a recommendation of approval of the site plan subject to conditions being satisfactorily addressed for administrative approval. The first is correcting a discrepancy of the current number of dock doors based on what is labeled on the plans. Because it's a truck terminal that has an existing special land use in the M2 district, there's no limit on the number of dock doors that they can have. So correcting that discrepancy won't affect their land use or any of their approvals. The second condition is that the plans clarify the use of the 14 new dock door areas marked as future doors in terms of when they'll be put in. The third condition is that the paved surface maintenance agreement language from the zoning ordinance be noted on the plans. The fourth condition is that the tax parcel ID number be noted on the plan. The fifth condition is that the discrepancy of the parking count in the parking data and project use statement notes be corrected. And again, there's no limits on the number of parking, just that discrepancy be corrected and accurately shown on the plans. And finally, the sixth recommended condition is that the discrepancy of the existing truck parking spaces and proposed truck parking spaces be corrected on the plans. And like the regular vehicle parking spaces, there's no limit on the number of truck parking spaces. The plans just have to accurately reflect either the labeling or the number of spaces there. So that concludes our review letter, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks so much. Let's go right to the engineer's review. Mr. Kaver, you want to tell us what FTCH has to say?
Sure, thank you. The applicant, as Patrick said, went over most of what the concerns were when we were reviewing the plans. The main concern being Wayne County and the stormwater management. The applicant provided the Wayne County approval that they weren't going to require a new permit. And that was in an email dated November 30th of 2018, and we've got that and as part of the package here. The couple of comments that the applicant was discussing that they should be able to accommodate mainly comes into question with their service connections. So they have a new water service connection going to the north and the sanitary connection. And one of the comments that we had was there was a bit of concern with the utility crossing of the sanitary line crossing the existing storm drain running east and west. And in conversations with V3, we believe that they will be able to accommodate our requirement for the separation. And if not, we have requested, based on the depth of that line, that the line be insulated to prevent any possible freezing, or because we're right about that frost line for that. Other than that, most of them are pretty minor comments. The other thing that we had requested was that they verify their demand pressures with the new break room and restroom facilities, and they have indicated that they will provide those. So at this point, we are recommending engineering and final site plan approval based on these conditions that are accommodated in their issued for construction plans.
Excellent, thank you very much. Dr. Akers, we have a review from the fire marshal. Anything of note?
The only comment that the fire marshal had indicated on his review was the comment that we see on many of the reviews with regards to two-way radio communication enhancement systems. This will be something that'll be handled when we apply for the building permit. The fire marshal's going to have to verify that they can have radio communication within the building in the event of emergency medical situation or fire, but otherwise it's nothing that would hold up final site plan.
Great, thanks so much. Questions or comments from the commission for the applicant or any of the professionals, staff? Anyone in the audience? I guess you all have explained yourself very well. If there are no questions or concerns, is there a motion?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Kelly.
I'd move to grant MG2 final site plan approval, excuse me, for the construction of a 43,260 square foot addition and related parking areas to the Costco Distribution Center located at 5860 Belleville Road. Subject to the conditions and based on the analysis detailed in the Fishbeck letter dated January 18th, 2019, the McKenna letter dated January 18th, 2019, and the Van Buren Fire Department letter dated December 3rd, 2018.
Support Commissioner Boyd. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? There you go, gentlemen. As soon as the ice melts, you can start building.
Sounds good. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you.
Good evening.
Item number 4 on tonight's agenda, the applicant U.S. Signal is requesting preliminary site plan approval to construct a 25,000 square foot data processing building. The location is 9275 Haggerty Road. This site is located at the northeast corner of Tyler and Haggerty Road. We'll start with the presentation by the applicant. Hello.
Good evening. I'm Mike Knowles. I'm with Diffin Umlor. Tonight, I'm presenting for U.S. Signal. We have representatives both from U.S. Signal and DeAngelis Diamond. They're general contractors if there are any questions about the operation of the facility or the construction of the facility. As you said, it is located on the northeast corner of Tyler and Haggerty. The site is 7.91 acres and is located in your office technology zoning district. It will be a data center for U.S. Signal. It is a proposed 100,000 square foot building in 4 phases. The first phase is 25,000 square feet. It will be primarily made up of a few offices, but mostly storage for their servers that collect and store data. We've gone through a staff planning meeting, and we received comments from both Mr. Sloan and Mr. Kammer. We believe that we have accommodated most of those comments. We have the review in front of you tonight, and I think that most of it is administrative. There's a couple of items that I think we have to work out the bugs, work out the details, but none of them are deal breakers. We have applied to Wayne County for approval. We have received a review letter from Wayne County and have plans just about ready to turn back into them. Unfortunately, the reviews didn't coincide. Wayne County is always just a little bit slower than Van Buren Township in issuing their reviews. So we're getting those done and getting those turned back around. One of the conditions is, of course, getting the Wayne County approval on our landscaping and on our stormwater management basin. So we're waiting to hear with them there. We're fairly confident that we've got that licked. We did meet with Ali and Hikmat before we started to make sure we knew what their requirements were going to be. Let's see, we're excited to get our applications into the MDEQ and to Great Lakes Water to get the water and sewer permits rocking and rolling so that we can start this building. I'm sure the McKenna and Fishbeck reviewers will go through their conditions. All of those are fairly easy to meet. We do have DeAngelis Diamond has started to work on getting that pressure test that was requested, so that's in the process. The Wayne County comments also corresponded a little bit with one of the parking lot comments about the front yard setback. They did ask for us to move the building back so that we were able to move the water main out of the buffer around the detention basin. So we moved it back 15 feet, and there's an additional 10 feet now with that setback for the parking, the 75-foot parking setback. So we're going to be able to accommodate that move as well. That was one of the bigger changes. That was not one of the administrative ones. We did receive also comments from the fire marshal and a few comments on the architecture that we'll be working through over the next several weeks.
Great.
And
Summary. You've
thanks.
put a lot of effort and a lot of work already into the application.
Thank you. We're excited about getting going.
We'll hear reviews from McKenna and then from Fishbeck and see what questions and comments we might have.
Thank you.
Mr. Sloan.
Thank you. And like with the previous submittal, the applicant had addressed many of the things that we bring up in our letter. Our review letter is dated January 18th of 2019, and we include comments on several of the site elements. What's before the Planning Commission tonight is a preliminary site plan review, and so after action on the preliminary site plan review, if it goes forward, the applicant makes any changes, reviews the conditions, and then comes back for final site plan review. Our recommendation for the preliminary site plan review is approval subject to several conditions. And although there are 20 conditions in our letter, as the applicant noted, Many of them are minor, some of which do have to be worked out. And oftentimes, the time between preliminary and site plan review is the best time to do that. Also, having several conditions is not out of the ordinary for a preliminary site plan review, because there is a final site plan review for that very purpose, to come back with those conditions. And those that are simple to comply with, I think we can do that. Others, it'll just have to be a judgment call between redesigning or perhaps applying for a variance, depending on if the site can comply. So what I'll do is just briefly go through the recommended conditions in our letter. The first is to clarify the potential timeline for construction of the phases. That'll have to be worked out. The zoning ordinance has some standards for phase development, so we'll just want some of that in writing, just so that we can have it on the site plan, something that can be relatively firm. The second is the labels of the architectural drawings must correctly classify the use. Third, the correct setbacks of the OT district must be labeled. Fourth, the front yard setback of 75 feet from the right-of-way of Haggerty Road must be met. This can be done by moving the building and parking lot eastward. If not, for some reason, there is the option for a variance application. So depending on how the redesign goes, they'll just have to decide how to go about that. The fifth is that the applicant state the peak ingress period from Haggerty Road. That's just a question about any potential vehicle stacking in front of the gate. The sixth is that the applicant clarify if the intent is to place large rocks along the two sides of the access drive within the site. The seventh is in future phases, the driveway around the building must be upgraded to asphalt or concrete. At this point, because it's preliminary and it's a phase one, some kind of labeling on the plan for compliance would help, especially if it's going to be one final approval for several phases. That'll have to be clarified. The eighth is that any sidewalk located on the applicant's property outside of a right-of-way must have a recorded access easement. The ninth is we recommend construction of a crosswalk on the north side of Tyler to connect to Haggerty Road. That's just a recommendation in our letter. There's nothing firm in the ordinance about any kind of crosswalk requirements, but there has been a crosswalk added on one of the other intersections. So we recommend one north of Tyler connecting to Haggerty if that's feasible. 10th, that the site plan calculations include the 3 spaces on the north side of the building. 11th, pursuant to section 9.101 of the zoning ordinance, we recommend that the applicant demonstrate the future levels of traffic for employees, customers, and other site users. That's just to make sure that the parking counts are accurately reflected with the use. 12th, that the irrigated areas be clarified on the plans and meet the zoning ordinance. 13, that the viburnum shrubs around the mechanical equipment be replaced with upright evergreens to meet the requirement of the zoning ordinance. So something like arborvitaes or upright junipers would screen the equipment. The 14th is that the landscape plan include a table indicating which areas of landscaping meet which requirements of the zoning ordinance. 15th, the photometric plan must be submitted. The 16th is that the architectural drawings must meet the requirements of section 3.114 of the zoning ordinance. This section of the zoning ordinance has several requirements for the architecture in the OT district. Much of it is suggestive, so there can be some creativity in the design and some flexibility. But for the most part, if a building elevation is visible from a public right-of-way or a residential district, the ordinance recommends vertical design elements, building offsets, facade articulations, overhangs, shadows, things to kind of break up the building and the massing of the facade. Some of it is horizontal and vertical projections and indentation, which take away from the box-like appearance and give it a non-box-like look. The facades should be integrated and harmonious with the material and the area. So anything with like reflective glass or large expanses of metal panels is not recommended. Also, the building is a concrete wall, which is permitted, but the ordinance does discourage concrete masonry units, or whether they're smooth or stained masonry units. And then the ordinance also recommends that those rear entrance facades be similar to a lot of the front facades. So those are just a few things where we recommend some additional details in the plan and see if the plans can modify the elevations just to meet that requirement. And as phases are added, that building's only going to get longer. So for something in the first phase to kind of set the tone for the rest of the building would be helpful. The 17th item is that the wing wall either be replaced with evergreen screening, which would give it a nicer appearance, or revised to comply with the ordinance. Alternatively, if the wall is for some reason required to be a certain height, the applicant could apply for a variance. The 18th condition is that the dumpster enclosure materials must be clarified and the bollards must be included. 19th is that the proposed fence height of 8 feet be approved by the Planning Commission if the Planning Commission determines that it meets the standards of Section 7.205B4 of the zoning ordinance. And that's a section where the Planning Commission can, in its discretion, raise a height of a fence from 6 feet up to 8 feet for security purposes or the nature of the use. And then finally, under number 20, that if Section 7.205 of the zoning ordinance is not amended to allow for fences in the front yard in the OT district, the applicant must apply for a variance for the proposed fence in the front yard. So we'll get into the discussion on a proposed zoning ordinance amendment for fences a little bit later, but this last one kind of covers both sides of that. So that completes our review of the plans, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Very comprehensive. I think we'll go to fish vector review, Mr. Kamer.
Sure. So yes, we, as Mr. Knowles indicated, we had a staff review back in early December where a lot of the hiccups that you usually get in this preliminary planning get kind of weeded out. And as Mr. Knowles indicated, one of the issues that came up was with the water main and crossing Haggerty Road. To give you an idea of this site, it's on the east side of Haggerty Road, and both the water service and the sanitary service are on the west side of Haggerty Road. And within the right-of-way of Haggerty Road, you have a 42-inch Galewa water main, you have a 16-inch sanitary force main. And so in working with the engineers, we suggested they move their water main coming off of Ricardo Drive, but they are still going to have to tap into the sanitary service line that's on the west side of the road. So some of the comments that you'll see in here kind of indicate those situations and more permitting or answers that they need to get from other authorities prior to getting engineering review or approval. So for the water main service, as we indicated, they are now coming off of Ricardo Drive, and one of the, as Patrick alluded to, this is a phased construction. And with the water main, there is going to be a requirement of them looping their water main for the future expansion. And for this early development, we just need to make sure that they have the pressure that they are needing to get to the other side of the building for their hydrant flow, and to make sure that their distance between their gate valves are within reason and within the township tolerances. So for their phasing there, they're proposing putting a line in the front of their building, and then for future expansion, then looping that to the back of the building and tapping back into Ricardo Drive. So one of the comments that Mr. Knowles alluded to was they had shown their water main going through what was the proposed detention pond, which we know that Wayne County does not like to have any utilities within even the buffer zone of that, but it sounds like that they have fixed that issue by moving the building back. And as I alluded to, there needs to be a indication that the length does not exceed the township allowable length for a dead-end 8-inch water main where the hydrants are tapping off of. Other minor comments will be gone over during engineering review. These were just kind of the minor comments for the water main. As far as the sanitary goes, they are still going to have to tap into the sanitary line on the west side of Haggerty Road. This means that they will have to directionally drill this sanitary service under the road without interrupting traffic, without open cutting the road. Now, that also means that they're going to go under the 42-inch Gliwa water main. They'll be going, correct me if I'm wrong, under the force main as well, under the 16-inch sanitary force main, which is doable, but again, Gliwa will require some sort of approval when crossing underneath this high-pressure large main. And as well as, I mean, Van Buren Township owns the force main, but that is I believe it's a Shiva force main, so they will probably need to be in the loop as well, which, as we get into engineering plan review, we will dive into that more. One of the suggestions that, to give you an idea, this property is a couple hundred feet north of the intersection. The sanitary main is located in the northwest quadrant of the Haggerty and Tyler intersection, actually on the JPMC corner. And what Van Buren is suggesting is that they actually extend that service north to a point where they can tap in directly across from their property, perpendicular to Haggerty, so that they're not coming at an angle from their property down into the intersection. So they will extend that sanitary to a new manhole. They will then also extend that to, for future expansion for anybody north of there that needs to tap as well. Again, more engineering details will come as we get into engineering review, but for the time being, they have met the requirements that we're asking for at this time. Finally, stormwater management, as Mr. Knowles alluded to, a lot of times we tend to stand back waiting for Wayne County to give their approval because we know that the utilities can get adjusted based on that, and it sounds like you've got that, and things may change, but they have shown feasibility for what we are asking and moving forward. So at this time, we are recommending preliminary plan approval for the site.
Great, thanks very much. Good lesson in what the utilities look like over on that side of the township, in case we had forgotten. And we also have a review by the Fire Marshal, Director Akers. I see some of the Fire Marshal's concerns have been met, but there are still some outstanding.
Yes. One item that I want to make a clarification. In the first paragraph under project overview, it indicates that the proposal is to build an unknown vehicle testing facility. That should actually say data center, and I just want to clarify that the review, and I double checked with the fire marshal, that the review was, that what was reflected in this letter was the U.S. signal plans that are under consideration tonight, so they were reviewed. There were several, there were several comments that were made which have been addressed. There's only three comments remaining from the fire marshal. The first one is with the two-way radio communication enhancement system, which we had discussed under a prior approval. Comment number 9, which talks about additional hydrants shall be required to be installed when the additional phases are built as they move through the project. And then the last comment that the fire marshal had made is that the paved surface, or the access area around the building, the fire marshal is requesting that it be a paved surface, as the tower truck weighs 68,000 pounds to be able to support the movement of the tower truck. So again, these are things that we can address between today, preliminary site plan approval, and final site plan approval, but we'll make sure it gets addressed.
Good, thank you. All right, questions or comments for the applicant, for planners, engineers, staff?
Madam Chair.
Sure, Mr. Jar.
There was a note in the McKenna letter, point 13, the site plan had noted that there were no monument signs for security purposes and no wall signs either.
That's correct.
You are planning on having an address on the building, right?
There will be an address, yes, but
Thank you, sir.
there will be no signage.
Could you speak a little bit about where your thoughts are today about the architectural design and some breakup of that wall? It's something that we worked very hard when we developed the OT district.
Yeah, unfortunately, Dixon Architecture drew the plans, not our firm, so I can't really speak to that tonight, but they're a very competent firm. We have a very diligent ownership group. We've been able to meet all of the requirements that have been thrown at us thus far, even though, you know, it has a tendency to increase the cost of the building. I'm confident that we'll be able to, with the working group, meet the requirements of the zoning so that the facade will be something that we'll all be proud of.
Excellent, thank you. Questions or comments from the audience? Most of you are part of the applicant. Anything you all want to add now that you've heard all of the reviews? All good? All right. Anything else? No. Everybody's good. It's a preliminary site plan approval, so I get to see them come back again with a lot more detail.
Yes.
But you really have invested quite a bit already. Are we ready for a motion?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Boynton?
I move that we grant the applicant, U.S. Signal Properties, preliminary site plan approval to construct a 25,000 square foot data processing building located at 9275 Haggerty Road on the northeast corner of Tyler Road and Haggerty Road, subject to the recommendations of letters provided by McKenna dated January 18th of 2019 of FTC&H, letter dated January 18th of 2019, and from Van Buren Township Fire Department, Dave McAnally, Fire Marshal, dated January 14th of 2019.
Support.
All right. Motion of Boynton, support Char. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Back to work, and we'll look
Thank you very
forward to
much.
seeing you again. Thank you very
Appreciate
much.
it.
Under general discussion tonight, we have a zoning ordinance amendment requiring fences, which may impact a couple of the applications we've looked at tonight. And Mr. Sloan has prepared a review and some suggestions for us. We looked at this briefly one meeting ago, 2 meetings ago, but looks like we've got some real language now. So you want to walk us through it, please, Mr. Sloan?
Sure. The proposed language is to section 7.205 of the zoning ordinance, which is titled Fences, Walls, and Other Protective Barriers. The proposed language is concurrent with a couple of industrial-related or data-related uses that would be impacted by the changed regulations. But also a few months ago, when we reviewed the Subaru plans, there was a lot of back and forth between the township and the applicant about the fence requirements, applicable types of fences, what the planning commission had discretion over, and which regulations applied. There's a lot of cross-referencing in the existing section, and cross-referencing is good, but there are 3 or 4 different sections that regulate some of the same things. So in some cases, it led to some conflicts over which section prevails. And so in looking at that, we worked with the township to come up with a proposal to, first of all, clarify the language. And then, second of all, once it's clarified and organized a little bit better, we figure out how we want to address those things that concern us. The first major thing that we did was regarding security fencing. Currently, all districts except the AP, which is the airport district, the M1 and M2 district, prohibit barbed wire, spikes, nails, and any other sharp instrument of any kind. We recommend moving that prohibition to the general standards at the front of the section. And then later in the section, when it gets into regulations of the AP, M1, and M2 districts, it would allow the planning commission to determine whether to allow barbed wire, spikes, nails, or any other sharp instrument of any kind. Therefore, instead of those districts having it by right, it's prohibited township-wide, but if any use in those districts wants to use that, the planning commission would have to review the proposal and make a decision. The second part of the proposed changes is the major part. And the first part of that is that it puts the standards into applicable districts. And so it's grouped into 3 different classes of districts. The first is a new subsection for fences and walls in the mixed use in all the commercial districts. The second one relates to the OT district, the AP, the M1 and the M2, so some of those office and industrial districts. And then the third class are the the residential districts. So for the first one, the first class is the mixed use in all the commercial districts. The regulation will still allow the height of a fence to be increased from 6 to 8 feet, only in the side or rear yard, but it's only if the planning commission permits that increase for safety purposes. So they would retain the right to have a 6-foot fence in the side or rear yard. The standards for front yard fences are preserved, and in commercial districts, that's 2.5 feet in the front yard, so something that is decorative. And then finally, the material would have to be decorative, but the planning commission can approve a chain link fence in a side or rear yard in those commercial districts. So those standards are mostly the same. The second class of uses or zoning districts is the OT district, which is added to the subsection on fences and walls for the AP, M1, and M2 districts. And in a moment here, we'll get into some of the differences between the OT districts and those other districts because there will be some differences. As previously noted, the subsection would still allow the fence to be increased from 6 to 8 feet, but again, the planning commission must permit that increase for safety. For fences in the AP, the M1, and the M2 district, they can still be constructed in a front yard according to the current regulations, but they must be decorative. For fences in the OT district, they can now be constructed in a front yard area if the planning commission approves the front yard location and the fence is decorative. And this would explicitly prohibit the chain link fences in the OT district. And then finally, the existing subsection for the fences and walls in the residential districts. Although there are some existing subsections added from another subsection of the ordinance, the provisions remain the same. So some of the existing text is duplicated a little bit and makes it a little bit longer, but by having those sections that relate just to districts, if someone's in a certain zoning district, they see the general requirements for all districts, then they go to the zoning districts, and then they're done looking at the regulations. So it's going to be a lot less back and forth, much more streamlined language. And then finally, in your packet, there are 2 versions of the ordinance. They're the same. One is what I call a red line version that shows each and every change in terms of what's deleted, what's added, and then a few editorial comments. It's kind of a messy version, but some people like it, find it helpful. The second version is a cleaner version with all the changes accepted to kind of show how it would read once all that stuff is out there. So they're both readable in their own right, and just one's more of a finished version of it. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
All right, questions or comments on amendment to fencing? Sure, Director Akers.
I just have a quick comment, and Mr. Sloan, I apologize. When I first went through this, it was something that I didn't catch, but under the industrial districts, we list AP, M1, and M2, but we don't list the MT zoning district under it. So yeah, so if it's okay with the planning commission, I'd like to add MT under there just to make sure we're covering our bases.
And that would also be included on any districts, the AP, M1, and M2. Those 3 are grouped together in several different areas, so the MT would naturally fit with those, so we can add that.
Do have to comment.
Okay, Commissioner Joe.
Mr. Sloan, in the section B.1, the OT district under location requirements, there's a statement that when the fence in the front yard is required for security, if you look 2 through 3 sections down in section D, the language is stronger. It says, provided that the planning commission determines that the fencing is necessary. I think it would be good if that Section 1, the OT district location requirements, was explicitly stating that it was the planning commission determining that the fencing was required for security. Otherwise, I think that the language doesn't match between the two sections. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah.
I see the item there, or the concern. Under D, that's much more, I would say, active language, because it's dealing with those, like barbed wire and spikes on a fence. But to raise the threshold for the OT district to allow it in the front yard, I think that's fine too, for the planning commission to determine it's required for safety.
I think that as a general comment, one of the reasons that we want to reconsider allowing front yard fencing in the OT district is to recognize that some of the permitted uses in the OT space really do have different security requirements from other uses. A simple office space, for example, probably does not have the same security requirement as a high-value asset data processing computational facility, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to recognize that it's not that we are simply determining that one property has a higher security requirement than another. It's what we need to recognize is that certain permitted uses inherently have a higher security requirement than others. And maybe we would like to come up with some language in the ordinance that recognizes those specific uses so that we can permit a front yard fence around say a compute facility, but at the same time discourage that type of fencing around campus office technology spaces. Just a thought.
Okay, that makes sense. We can make the language more active and come up with some examples of uses.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Boynton.
Well, one thing what Commissioner Jarr mentioned, you could have one use that would have a higher security
Yes, sir.
concern than others.
I agree.
So, I do see that as a viable point, but also to staff and to our planners, under security, how do you gentlemen feel about language concerning energized barriers?
Like electric fence?
Nobody wants to touch that.
It's
Good one.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
I believe there's a prohibition for electric fences in there, is there not? I might be wrong.
Well, I'm pretty sure there's an entity out there somewhere that may view a property that we may have that would fit their needs, and they may be of a stature to where they would require
Didn't
such
we have a request
barrier.
for that from one of the towers? We said, no way.
Not that I can recall.
Okay. I must have dreamt it.
I guess, Commissioner Boynton, to answer your question, I think it's in there, and we'll double check to see if it's in there, but if it's not in there, I don't think it's unreasonable to ensure that it's in there. Because, electric fences can be dangerous, for sure. So, it's at the.
They'd have to, I can't imagine what kind of a setback you'd have to have from another zoning district if you had that.
Well, you could also regulate the strength of the.
Wait, are you suggesting that we need it under certain circumstances? Is that what you're saying? That there needs to?
Well,
we need to spell out?
we're spelling out barbed, spikes, nails,
Right.
or other sharp objects, or other sharp instruments, which would also probably cover Constantino wire.
Right.
But there may
If
be,
if the feds or the state wanted to build a prison within the township, would we have the right to approve or disapprove, or can they supersede the same way the schools can supersede?
I don't know.
That I don't know the answer to.
We're getting pretty far afield here.
Well, I think it also depends on the agency that builds the prison too.
Okay.
If I think it's a private for-profit prison, I think we might have jurisdiction, but I think if it's a federal agency that constructs it, we may not, so that'll be something that depends.
All right, so you'll find out if we precluded electrified fencing now or not. And if we don't, maybe there's some other ordinances that already exist that have figured out how to handle that for security purposes, and we can take a look at that.
Or, if I may, perhaps
This is just
adding,
general discussion, so
adding the
jump in.
language into the list of, right now we have an explicit list of barbed wire, spikes, nails, or other sharp instruments. Maybe we should add the phrasing other dangerous, potentially dangerous
Right.
implements. I don't think lasers would be good on fences either.
Also true.
Through the chair, I mean, it's not, we had electric fences on the farm. Of
course.
I mean, that's what we used, electric fences. It was low voltage. I don't know if I would want kids to be able to walk by the front of someplace like this, touch a fence and get a shock. I don't know if that's what we would like.
Even if it's low voltage,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And that brings up a concern that we would want to make sure if we're going to do something to, prevent them, we'd want to make sure there's an exemption for agricultural properties and
Good point.
so.
Mine-
You were so close, Patrick. I mean, you almost had it.
Well, this is good. It's good to talk about it.
It is
It's all a
good.
reorganization.
I agree.
I guess my next question through the chair is the height. They have requested a 14-foot wall. I do think the other gentlemen at US Signal are going to be looking for a fence for security purposes also.
In their front yard.
In the front yard, if we only go to 8 feet, we haven't met the needs of,
US Signal's fence will not exceed 8 feet in height based on the plans and discussions we've had. So 8 feet works for them. The 14-foot high blast wall for JPMC, that because of some of the FDIC requirements, that's kind of a very, I think it's a more unique situation. I think 8 feet works, and Mr. Sloan, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's consistent with many other communities as far as security fencing and what we typically see.
Yeah, a lot of communities go 6 feet, but a lot of industrial applications, they want to use 8 feet as a standard because it's much more difficult to climb it and to get through it. So 8 feet can be common for those types of applications.
so would the 14-foot going to be a problem for them, or they would take it down to 8? Or is it because it's not in the front?
For JPMC, the 14-foot, they're gonna be applying for a variance to get the 14-foot tall fence, just because of the uniqueness of the situation.
Okay.
Because this is looking at globally fences, around the entire community, it may be more appropriate to kind of handle those specific situations, on a case-by-case basis. I can't think of any uses that we'd run into that are in these districts where we start to see regular fences in excess of 8 feet, but things have surprised me in the past too, so you never know.
Yeah, well, we kind of did with Menards when they wanted the 14-foot walls on their buildings, and I think we also found out Walmart had some and Myers had some too. So, yeah, okay.
All right, so schedule-wise, where does this put us? One more draft or call the public hearing? What's your plan?
So, we have the public hearing scheduled for the 13th of February. But if the planning commission wants to look at another draft, we can cancel it and schedule it for a different time. Regarding the schedule for, some of the projects, they're both trending on a likely April final site plan approval. So if we consider it on February 13th, it'll be before the township board, probably at their second meeting in February and then first meeting in March. So that'll be on track, or if it gets pushed back to the second meeting in February, we'd be looking at potentially the first meeting in March and second meeting in March, so we can handle it either way. I have the public hearing notices are gonna be in the paper tomorrow.
I'm comfortable with the public hearing notice and of seeing this additional language for the first time.
Okay.
We don't have to approve it at that meeting if there are still questions or discussion. Does that sound right to everyone?
Yeah, and we're working within the same section of the zoning ordinance, the 7.205, and it's a lot of the same subject matter that we're talking about.
Okay. All right, back to work. Anyone else, something for general discussion? Commissioners?
I have
Director Akers.
one comment, is just to give the planning commission a heads up that our meetings in February will not be televised, and they will be relocated to the Otisville Sheldon room, because they're gonna be doing construction in the boardroom to do the necessary improvements, and they're gonna be doing upgrades to some of our AV equipment. So the room's gonna be shut down for the whole month of February. So we're gonna be holding our planning commission meetings in the opposite room. And then we will have a meeting on the 13th with the public hearing for the fences, and we may have a couple more new home elevation applications that'll be coming forward. So we are gonna have a couple of agenda items to look at in February. Thank you.
I know we've been here, oh, I'm sorry.
Through the chair, I just wanted to ask about our master plan subcommittee. We stopped meeting in December, and I was just wondering when we're going to get back on the calendar again.
We are currently, Kennan Associates is currently working on selecting an individual to continue the work on the master plan. Mike Deem, who was their primary person who was working on it, left to take a different position. So McKenna Associates is currently working on identifying a replacement for Mike, and once they get somebody up on board, we're gonna move forward with our other engagement strategies.
All right, I know we've been here for a while tonight, but something has changed, and I just want to make note of it. I mean, these were very comprehensive applications that we had tonight. The review letters had a lot of points. We've had that before. We've had complicated applications, and we've had both preliminary and final with a lot of points to come up. But it is cleaner now. So I think something that you're doing and then something that you're doing with them is working really, really well. I mean, by the time the work comes to us, the applicants we're getting good applicants. They're strong in where they're at. They already know what the issues are, and they're beginning to deal with them. It's just much better than I ever remember it being before. And hats off to you guys. Really good work. Yeah. And it makes our job a lot easier, too. We're willing to be the bad guys, and we need to be the bad guys, but it's nice to just have good projects and something fun that we can get excited about. So.
Yes.
Well, thank you.
All right.
It's always easier to identify bad news up front than at a board meeting, and in a lot of instances, and you know, Mr. Sloan and I will meet with the applicants ahead of time a lot, and you know, we'll kind of go through and have our arguments about certain things and make sure that they're understanding what our zoning code requires and what we're going to be looking for. And you know, fortunately, we've had some really good applicants who have been really wonderful to work with and willing to work with us. But thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else, there a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Commissioner Boynton, support? Support. Mr. Franzoy, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, thank you.
Nobody
We're
wants to go
adjourned.
home.
This good meeting.